Hey everyone, it's Ben. Hope everyone's having a nice holiday weekend. Today is going to be the final part of my Stephen King novel short story to film adaptation series that I started doing last week. Today's is going to be on The Shawshank Redemption, which is obviously not a horror film, but it is a film that I think holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts, and it is a film that went on to become a phenomenon after it was initially released in theaters in 1994. So I think it's an important film to talk about, just like Stand By Me. So this is going to be the final part of this series, and I hope everyone enjoys the review of The Shawshank Redemption. Thanks a lot. So we have The Shawshank Redemption. Now, The Shawshank Redemption was released in 1994. It was adapted for the screen from Stephen King's short story from different seasons by Frank Darabont, who also directed the film. The film starred Tim Robbins as Andy Dufresne, Morgan Freeman as Red, Bob Gunton as Warden Norton, William Sadler as Haywood, Clancy Brown as Captain Hadley, Gil Bellows as Tommy, Mark Ralston as Boggs, and of course the late James Whitmore as Brooks. Stephen King's short story was called Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, and it's a short story in the same book that housed the body for Stand By Me, and also At Pupil, which was later adapted into a film. The reason for the name change had to do with the fact that a lot of people in Hollywood, the perception was that the film was a biopic of Rita Hayworth. In fact, Frank Darabont even received several solicitations from actresses looking to play the famous actress. Hence, they changed the name to simply The Shawshank Redemption. A couple other things that are different from the book as it was adapted to the film is that Red is a white Irishman in the book. The warden, there's not one central warden in the book or in the short story. It's actually three wardens, and Brooks, who's a very prominent figure in the movie, is actually mentioned just briefly in a short paragraph in the story. Stephen King sold the rights cheaply to Darabont. The two were close friends from a time when Darabont actually adapted a short story of King's, The Woman in the Room. Okay, the story of The Shawshank Redemption revolves around the central character of Andy Dufresne, who is convicted to life in prison for the murder of his wife and her lover in a fit of rage fueled by jealousy and alcohol. Receiving a double life sentence, he is sent to brutal Shawshank State Prison. Once there, he forges an unlikely friendship with a seasoned lifer, the character of Red, who is a fixer running a profitable sideline and procuring and smuggling anything in or out of the prison for a price. Dufresne also becomes very popular with the Shawshank's Warden Norton and some of the prison guards, who use his financial talents to help several corrupt officials amass personal fortunes using prison labor. Over the next 20 years, against this backdrop of prison life, Dufresne finds a way to survive and teach others about the power of hope, friendship, and redemption. Now, when The Shawshank Redemption was originally released in 1994, it was pretty much shunned by American audiences. The film flopped at the U.S. box office, grossing only $28.3 million. It was a crash and burn, Frank Darabont told Empire magazine. As I discovered, there's a difference between the audience enjoying a movie and being convinced to show up in the first place. Thank God for video, because the film became the top video rental of 1995. And I think that's when most audiences actually saw the film and connected with it like they have. It's amazing that a film that is so powerful and that is so popular, I think even more so now than when it initially even came out on video, would be considered a flop. But that's what The Shawshank Redemption was. And I think that it had a lot to do with the title, that the fact that it was set in a prison. There just wasn't really anything that appealing that had it stand out for American audiences to go and see. Plus, Frank Darabont was a relatively new filmmaker. It was his first film that he had directed. He was actually at the time flip-flopping between doing this film version and The Mist, which was a film he would later adapt in 2007. But, I mean, the Shawshank Redemption is a beautiful film. And I found, I discovered it like many. I rented it on videotape in 1995 when it was first released. And I remember I had a hard time finding it. It was very difficult to rent because it was always out. And I said, what's so important about this movie? Why is it so popular? And you watch it, and the movie, I mean, the prison is, the backdrop, but the movie is about friendship. It's about relationships. It's about, in dire situations like Andy finds himself in, about having the hope that things will turn out for the better. And that's, I think they're positive messages, and I think everybody can connect with them, even if they're not incarcerated in a prison, just in everyday life, having that positive outlook that Andy brings to this very, sad and depressing place that he finds himself in. Now, the acting in this film is just phenomenal. I mean, Morgan Freeman, who's just a class act, does a tremendous job as Red. I mean, you really feel his desperation, especially at the beginning when you first meet the character and he's being rejected for parole again. You can just see it on his face. He doesn't have to say anything, and that's just the strength of Morgan Freeman as an actor. And you really love the character of Red. He's a man that's made mistakes in his life, and he's truly sorry for them, but there's just no getting around them. He cannot get past what he's done. And the character of Andy, Tim Robbins, I've always been a fan of Tim Robbins too, and I'm so glad that he was able to really take this part and make it. Some of the original cast that they had in mind for playing the Andy character were like Tom Cruise, and I'm trying to think of another one that Tom Cruise was going to play it, and I think they had initially Harrison Ford was going to play Red. And I'm just so glad that they went with Tim Robbins, who was more of a character actor than a big star, and he does just a great job as Andy. And the friendship between Red and Andy is really the heart of the film. You really love them as friends. And Robbins also brings, this sadness to his character because, and for a while you don't know if he has done the crime that he's been committed of. In your heart you believe that he hasn't, but you don't know, because Red doesn't seem like the type that would have done the crime that he's been incarcerated for. So through the movie, until you actually come to the conclusion of what happened, you sort of had that in the back of your mind. Did Andy really kill his wife? But there's this sadness that Andy has when it first starts and when he first is incarcerated, and you're just there with him. And I think it's another testament to Robbins as an actor. He's such a good man, you can tell, but he is in this horrible place and he has to adapt to it at first because he's on his own. And it's a really scary world, even though it was set in the 40s. You're there with Andy through his encounters with people in the prison and the people that mean to hurt him. Also great in the cast is Bob Gunton as Warden Norton. Very sleazy character, but Bob's a good actor. And also William Sadler as Haywood sort of provides a little bit of comic relief, but another great performance by him. Was always a fan of him, going back to Die Hard 2. Clancy Brown I've always been a huge fan of, and he is a scary presence as Captain Hadley. Just, one you just want to steer clear of because he is a very violent man, and he will not think twice about taking somebody down that stands up to him or says something in the wrong way. Gil Bellows was very good as Tommy. You really like the character. Again, another great actor in this film. Not really familiar with some of his other work. I know he was on Ally McBeal, but he does a great job in this role. And then, of course, the great James Whitmore as Brooks. Really loved Brooks. He reminded me a lot of my grandfather. Just a sweet man, and Darabont initially cast him because he was one of his favorite character actors. Now, the screenplay by Frank Darabont is just amazing. I mean, Stephen King's story is a good story, just like any Stephen King story. But Darabont took it into a different realm. He actually, I think, elevated the proceedings with his story. He made, and I think that's something that's easier for a filmmaker or a screenwriter to do with a short story as opposed to adapting a full novel. You know, the Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption is like 100 pages, and he turned it into one of the best movies ever made. And I think it's just a testament to Frank Darabont as a screenwriter and as a director. I mean, the man's only done a handful of films, and every one of them is amazing, in my opinion, especially this one and The Green Mile. But I also love The Mist, and The Mist was actually one that Darabont was planning on doing before Shawshank, but then he changed his mind at the last minute and decided to do Shawshank. But if you guys ever get a chance to pick up his screenplay, it's really a good screenplay because it talks about, you know, there's an intro by him talking about, you know, just what he went through to make the film, and it's just it's a nice find, and I'm glad I have it. But just I'm a huge fan of Frank Darabont's. I you know, love The Walking Dead that he was working on, and I heard he has a new show coming out that he's been working on. So, but yeah, he's an amazing director, great writer, just really good at characters and developing characters, and just a true master craftsman, in my opinion. The other thing I cannot stress strongly enough about this film is how beautiful the music is. What an uplifting soundtrack that Thomas Newman crafted for this film. Thomas Newman is my favorite composer for films. He did an amazing job on this film, but he's also done films like he did American Beauty, he did The Green Mile, he did The Help most recently, and he also did Adjustment Bureau, just to name a few of his scores. He did the movie Brothers. He's done a few Disney films. He did the Finding Nemo. He did Wall-E. Just an amazing composer. I can't say it enough. Big fan of his. And I think this Shawshank Redemption score is one of the most beautiful in history. Just an amazing job. Very big fan of Thomas Newman. In conclusion, I love The Shawshank Redemption. I have since I saw it when I was 21 years old, watching it with my mom and my grandparents, and going through the array of emotions the film brings out in somebody. You know, it makes you angry, it makes you sad, but it also, at the end, it gives you hope. And Darabont did a great job of crafting a very short Stephen King story into this masterpiece. And hats off to him, hats off to the actors, Morgan Freeman, you know, Tim Robbins, just a great cast, a really uplifting story, and I think that's why the film is so powerful and so it resonates so much with people, especially nowadays when there is so much sadness and people have to sort of overcome so many obstacles. And I think a film like this is always going to be relevant. I think, you know, we'll be talking about this film in 50 years. It's just going to be one of those films like a Citizen Kane, like a Casablanca, like a Gone with the Wind. It's always going to be around, and you know, I think it's just it's amazing, and it's also great, you know, for people who love film. And if you haven't seen The Shawshank Redemption, where have you been? Go out and see it. It's one of the best films ever made. Again, thank you all from people that are watching this, and to people that have watched the other films I've adapted or talked about, the Stephen King short story and novel adaptions to film. I appreciate everybody taking the time to watch this, and let me know what you think about this film. Please feel free to comment. I always love to read people's comments about my videos, and stay tuned for some new stuff from me coming this week. And thanks again, everybody. Hope everyone has a nice day.